we can bring in the jury.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. The defense may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense called Daryl Brewer.
Sir, please come forward to be sworn, right up here.
Right here. Right here. Can you spell your first and last name, please?
Yes, D-A-R-R-Y-L. Last name Brewer, B-R-E-W-E-R.
All right. Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Sir, please walk right around here and have a seat. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
My name is Daryl Brewer.
And Daryl, where do you live?
I live in Carmel, California.
And are you single, married, divorced?
I am divorced.
Okay. And Mr. Brewer, how old are you?
I'm 52.
And do you have any children?
Yes, I have one son,
Okay, and how old is your son?
14.
Okay. Do you know this lady here in the blue shirt?
Yes.
How do you know her?
I know Jodi because we were in love.
Step back a little bit. Why don't we talk about when you met her? Do you recall that?
Yes, I met Jodi in the fall of 2001.
Okay. Could you describe for all of us the circumstances of how you met Jodi?
Yes, I was employed as food and beverage director at Ventana Inn and Spa in Big Sur, and Jodi came as an applicant applying for a job as a server.
And how did she present herself during her interview with you?
Outstanding. She was on time, she interviewed well, she was dressed appropriately.
And did you hire Miss Arias at that point in time?
Yes.
Okay. And you said at that point in time you were a food and beverage manager. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And how long had you worked at Ventana prior to that time?
Just about a year.
Okay. Why don't you do us a favor and back up a little bit and describe Ventana, what it is, and what you did there.
Yes, Ventana is a 63-room boutique hotel on the Big Sur coast with wedding and banquet facilities and restaurants. And I was hired as the food and beverage manager to run the food and beverage operation.
And the food and beverage operation, is that just a restaurant, or is it more extensive than that?
It consists of managing the restaurant, the room service, the banquets, cafe, associated duties with food and beverage being offered on the property.
Okay. And what position specifically, because I don't think we were clear, what position was she applying and ultimately hired for?
The position of server.
Okay. And is there more than one restaurant in your in the resort, or is it just the one?
There's one main restaurant, and there's also breakfast service at the inn itself.
Okay.
So,
and so we're clear, this was this at the main restaurant or the?
this is the main restaurant.
Okay. And you described it as high-end, correct?
Yes, it's rather, it was voted a 4-star resort by a mobile travel guide for many, many years.
Okay. So in order for somebody to get hired, you would be particularly concerned about how they would present themselves or how they would act. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Now, at the point in time you hired Ms. Arias, I would take it to understand that you would be a supervisor to her. Am I correct in understanding that?
Yes.
Okay. And to further clarify for everyone, were you her direct supervisor? Were there restaurant managers? How did that work?
Jodi was under my direct supervision. There were other managers involved.
Okay. During your time period, and how after you hired Jodi, how long did you remain as the food and beverage manager?
Approximately a year.
Okay. So you were her supervisor for about a year?
Yes.
Okay. And did the resort, Ventana, did they have any policies in terms of reviewing a person's work, annual evaluations, semi-annual evaluations, anything of that nature?
Yes, they
Okay.
did. It started off with a 90-day probation with an evaluation at 90 days. And at that point, the employee was either kept or let go.
Okay.
And then from then on, it was annual evaluations.
Okay. Tell us, did Jodi survive, I guess it would be the right term, that 90-day evaluation period?
Yes,
Okay. She was doing well as an employee?
she was excelling, yes.
Okay. And in assessing that, it sounds like you worked with her on a daily or near daily basis. Is that accurate on my part?
That is accurate, almost daily.
Almost daily. Okay. And you were her supervisor again for about a year in total, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in that time, was there any disciplinary problems, any behavioral problems, anything of that nature where she was inappropriate with customers or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Now, at this point in time, were you dating Miss Arias?
No.
Okay. When did you talked about after about a year, you weren't her supervisor anymore. So describe for us what happened within your job or her job that changed your status as a supervisor.
We had changes in our management and other positions that affect my job, and I made the decision to step out of my management job and did so.
Okay. And just backing up a bit, your son, how old was your son when you worked at Ventana? When
I
you
started
began, I
in
should say.
a year and a half when I started.
Okay. And were you divorced at this time?
I was.
Okay. Now, you mentioned there was a shift in the management structure at Ventana. You were no longer Jodi's boss after that shift. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you have a new job title? Could you just kind of describe that for us?
Yes, I was working as a server in banquets and helping with the weddings.
Okay. So you were then you went from a supervisor of Jodi's to a co-worker? Is that?
Yes,
Okay. And up until that point in time, there had been no romantic relationship at all?
correct.
Okay. Did that romantic relationship then evolve when you were co-workers?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Tell us about that.
We began to spend a little more time together. Our relationship was not supervisor-employee anymore, and became infatuated and fell in love.
Okay. Well, you said a lot there, so let's kind of break that down a little bit. Were you living at the resort or just working there?
I was living in the staff housing at the resort,
Okay.
yes.
And to your recollection, was Miss Arias also living in that staff housing?
She was also living in staff housing.
Okay. So you begin to spend your off hours together, and you're working together, and you're falling in love.
Correct.
Okay. Tell us about who Jodi was at that point in time.
Jodi was a very responsible, caring, loving person.
And she knew of your son?
She did know of my son, yes.
Okay. And how long a period of time did you date Miss Arias altogether?
Just about 4 years.
Okay. And it began when you moved yourself down to, when you were moved down to a server position, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you two lived in the employee housing. And how long did you remain there?
I was in staff housing until sometime in 2003 when I moved to Monterey.
Okay. And when you moved to Monterey, how far is the Ventana Resort from Monterey?
It's about 32 miles.
Okay. Is this resort, Ventana, is this kind of seasonal work, or has a peak season, or is it one of these type resorts, or is it an all year round?
It is open year-round and does peak in the summer season.
Okay. Could you explain to us then why you decided to move to Monterey?
I wanted to be out of the staff housing situation. It's not the best housing. And,
Okay. All right. And did Jodi move with you, or how did that? Tell us about that.
Jodi did not move with me. She lived in the staff housing at Ventana, separate from me, separate
Okay.
houses. I moved back to town, to Monterey, and Jodi remained in staff housing.
Okay. Did the relationship continue after you moved?
It did.
Okay. And how often would you see each other?
I would have to say 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay. And was there a point in time, whether it was before or after you moved to Monterey, that you were boyfriend and girlfriend, or an exclusive relationship? How would you, or if you had a definition of that type?
Our relationship, I would say, was boyfriend and girlfriend, and I would say that it was exclusive.
Okay. And when do you think that, was that right away, or was that after you moved? When did that kind of come about?
Before I moved to town and continued on after.
Okay. Was there any point in time when you and Miss Arias came to live together?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us about how that situation arose and where you were in your relationship when that decision was made.
The decision was made to live together when we purchased a house together.
Okay. And when was that?
That was in 2005.
Okay. And was that in Monterey, or was that somewhere else?
That was in Palm Desert, California.
And why was the two of you made a decision to purchase a home together?
We did.
Okay. And how did that work? Were you both on the mortgage?
We were,
Okay. And so it was a pretty stable relationship at that point in time?
very much so.
Okay. And the home you purchased, you said Palm Desert. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why Palm Desert as opposed to Monterey? Was there any particular reason?
The mother of my son had plans to remarry and move to that area. And so I chose to be in that area because of my son.
Okay. And if I'm following right, at the time you purchased the home, your son would have been about 4 or 5?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the custodial situation between you and your ex-wife?
We shared custody.
Okay. So in terms of this home you were purchasing with Miss Arias, it was going to include, your son was going to live there as well, at least part of the time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. How did you come to the point where you felt like it was okay for that situation to introduce your son to Jodi? Tell us about that a little bit, maybe, and explain why you felt it was okay to introduce him and then ultimately have the three of you live together.
After my divorce, after my separation, I should say, I was not divorced in 2000. It was a little while after that the paperwork was official, but I was separated and moved away, and we were, for all intents and purposes, divorced. And I was very wary about bringing anyone around my son. I was in a position where I shared custody with his mother, and that meant that I was a part-time with my son, and that time was very valuable to me, and so I made a choice to not introduce other people. I wasn't dating before Jodi.
Okay.
And so Jodi met my son slowly and gradually. By the time we moved in together, Jodi lived with us, and I lived with Jodi, and my son lived with us part-time.
Okay. And how was Jodi's relationship with your son?
It was outstanding.
Were they close?
They were close.
Did they spend time together on their own?
They did. There were a few occasions where they were together on their own.
Okay. And did you also go out, the three of you, doing events together, going to places together?
We did.
Okay. I know you weren't married to Jodi, but was she serving as kind of a stepmother role to your son at that point in time?
I would not describe it as a stepmother role at all.
Okay.
A friendly role, a friend to Jack is how I would describe it.
Okay. This home you purchased in Palm Desert, when was this home purchased?
This was in June of 2005.
Okay. And I mentioned the both of you being on the mortgage. You weren't married, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Were there plans for that? What was the status of the relationship when the two of you bought a home together?
When the two of us bought a home together, we were boyfriend, girlfriend, homeowners together. Plans for marriage, I could not say that I had planned to get married or not. I was unsure.
Okay. You'd been together, excuse me, with Miss Arias for a few years at the point in time that you purchased a home, right?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of the subject of marriage, was that ever discussed between you and Jodi?
It was occasionally. I can't tell you how often, not very often. She knew that I was coming out of a divorce, and I was not ready to be married again.
Okay. And that was was that something that was discussed early on in the relationship, or was that something that came up later?
I would have to say somewhat later.
Okay. And that was about you, not Jodi, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you must have been very happy in the relationship at the point in time when you were buying this house. Is that fair to say?
I was indeed.
Okay. In terms of this contract, this mortgage, Was there a particular plan in terms of, are you going to live there the rest of your lives? You're going to live there for a few years? Was that discussed?
The plan was somewhat uncertain, revolving around my son. We had hoped to stay in the house for a minimum of at least 2 years. We weren't in the process of flipping houses. We wanted to establish the home and possibly resell it.
Okay. So was this part business venture, part home, shall we say? I mean, a home to live in, but also a business venture?
Not a formal business venture, a personal business venture. I mean, it was a home, but we also looked at it as an investment. Hope to gain from it at some point.
Okay. And do you recall the amount of the mortgage on the home? The monthly payment, monthly mortgage?
The monthly payments were somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,700, $1,800.
Okay. And was that something that was that amount? I take it you split that down the middle?
We did. We shared expenses.
Okay. And was that something that was difficult for you to both to pay your halves of the mortgage? Was that a strain or?
No, we were able to accomplish it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And where were you working at the time that you purchased the house? Were you still at Ventana?
No, I had left Ventana and left my other employment in Monterey. At the time of the home purchase, I was looking for work in Palm Desert.
Okay. And where was Jodi working to your recollection?
Jodi was working at the California Pizza Kitchen in Monterey, and then also in Palm Desert when we moved. Okay.
And I just want to clarify, when you purchased the home, did she have 2 jobs, or was this just a matter of moving? You mentioned a couple jobs, so I was a little confused.
I'm sorry. When we moved to Palm Desert, she started working at the California Pizza Kitchen and then eventually got a second job.
Okay. And do you recall where that second job was?
At a restaurant called Quisto.
Okay. So she was working 2 jobs, and you were looking for work, correct?
Correct.
At this point in time. And Jack was living with you on a part-time basis, right?
Correct.
Okay. Was there a point in time where Jodi was paying the home mortgage, or how did that work with you not working?
I got a job and went to work within 2.5 months.
Okay.
And was able to support my share until then.
Okay. And the relationship was still happy at this point in time?
Very much so.
Okay. And refresh me again, when did you sign off on the mortgage of this home?
Late May, early June 2005.
Okay, 2005. So how long did the 2 of you live in this home?
We lived in that home until December of 2006.
Okay. And how many rooms were in the home?
3 bedrooms.
Okay, 3 bedrooms. Did you and Miss Arias share a bedroom, or did you have separate bedrooms?
We had separate bedrooms and shared a bedroom quite often.
Okay. Was there a reason for the separate? Was that just for appearances for Jack, or?
It wasn't for appearances. It was a matter of the amount of things we had.
Okay.
Beds, dressers, etc.
Okay. I want to fast forward a little bit to your life in 2006, in the summer of 2006. What was going on in the summer of 2006? Were you still living with Jodi?
I was.
Okay. At this point in time, it seems to me like you would have been in the relationship 3.5 years. Is that about right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that a yes? The court reporter
Yes.
needs to hear yes or no. Thank you. At this point in time, was there or had there been more discussion about marriage?
No.
Okay. You were still in love with Jodi?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, she was still in love with you?
Yes.
Okay. During this point in time, during the point in time of your relationship up to the summer of 2006, did you ever see Jodi act jealous towards women that you came in contact with?
No.
When you first met her at Ventana, or first began dating her, I should say, when you were working at Ventana, I would suspect there was a lot of females at the workplace there as well.
Certainly.
Okay. Majority, would you say, of the workforce?
Was the majority of the workforce female?
Yes.
I couldn't say.
Okay. But during that time period, did Jodi ever act jealous at all?
Not that I saw.
Okay. Did you ever notice her being violent or having a violent temper?
Never.
Do you remember a point in time when Jodi became involved in Prepaid Legal?
I do.
Okay. Do you remember about when that was?
I want to say early 2006, maybe March, April.
Okay. And tell us about what you knew about her involvement in Prepaid Legal. How did it begin, to your knowledge?
I don't recall how Jodi learned about it,
Okay.
but she did share it with me, and it was exciting.
Okay. Do you remember her going to Las Vegas to a convention?
I
For
do.
Prepaid Legal. Okay. At this point in time, or I should say prior to her going to this convention, I'm trying to get a good sense here. Was she still working the two jobs?
Prior to going to convention. She was still working two jobs, as far as I knew, up until some point in the fall of 2006.
Okay. And what happened, you mentioned the fall of 2006. What happened in the fall of 2006?
In the fall of 2006, the mother of my son decided to move back to Monterey and took my son as well, and he started school in Pacific Grove in the fall of 2006.
Okay. To kind of help us understand everything you mentioned, Palm Desert and Monterey, and it seems like we've gone back and forth a couple times. How far away is Monterey from Palm Desert?
9 to 10 hour drive.
Okay.
Several hundred miles.
Okay. So you mentioned that your ex-wife is going to move 9 hours away to Monterey, and were you going to follow Jack, or can you kind of explain that to us, what was going on with you?
Yes, I was going to follow Jack, and I began a strategy of how to get back to Monterey.
Okay. And talk to us a little bit about that strategy, if you will.
The strategy was that I was trying to find work, and as soon as I found work, I was going to move back to Monterey and continue to support the household and pay the mortgage in Palm Desert.
Okay. So was the plan for Jodi to move with you back to Monterey, or what about the dynamics of your relationship with Miss Arias?
We had not planned per se for her to move back. My hope was that she would remain in the home until we could come to a resolution, until we could sell the house.
Okay. In terms of the relationship at this point in time, was it, were you breaking up? Was it going to be a long-distance relationship? What were the discussions about your relationship with Miss Arias?
Let's see. The relationship was slowly deteriorating over the summer of 2006. By the fall, Jodi had. We were still together in the home, but it was becoming clear that I was moving back to Monterey, and that we would not be living together.
Okay. So you're saying at this point in time, things were kind of coming to a natural end. Is that what you're telling us?
I don't know how natural it was. I saw a lot of changes in Jodi. She became a bit of a different person than I had known previously.
Okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit. You said she became a different person than you had known previously. Can you explain to us what you meant by that, or what you mean by that?
What I mean is that as she got more involved with Prepaid Legal, she became less responsible to the household bills. I think that she had thoughts of succeeding in Prepaid Legal and being able to support herself through those efforts, and it didn't quite seem to be the case.
Okay. Let's break that down a little bit. You said a lot. Was she still working the 2 jobs at the Pizza Kitchen and Croissant, I think is how I say it? Was she still working those 2 jobs, or did Prepaid Legal become the primary focus?
I believe that Prepaid Legal became her primary focus, and she did continue to work the 2 jobs.
She did or did not?
She did until some point, as far as I know, in the summer of 2006.
Okay. And in the fall of 2006 as well, at this point in time, you're living in Monterey?
I'm living in the desert in the fall of 2006 and trying to get back to Monterey.
Okay, trying to get back to Monterey. You're not there yet. And this $1,800 a month mortgage, was that right? Was it still that at that point in time?
It was the same. It might have been slightly more than that, but it was the same the whole time. Mhm.
Okay. Was she paying her half of the mortgage and still fulfilling her end of the obligation?
In the fall of 2006, she had continued to pay the mortgage. She was not paying other household bills, and it looked like she was becoming, maybe getting into debt or into financial trouble. She continued to pay the mortgage into the fall of 2006, and then was unable to do so after that.
Okay. And that was a change in Jodi as well, because prior to that, she had paid all the bills, worked the jobs, and kept up on her end of the bargain, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you said it appeared to you that she was putting all her faith, if you will, into Prepaid Legal.
Yes.
And describe what you mean by that. I mean, was she just thinking she was going to be immediately prosperous? How to kind of describe for us the things?
I think she thought she was going to be prosperous, maybe not immediately, but very shortly. And for me, it seemed to me like she was not as rational and not as logical as she was prior. That there was almost a magical thinking that if we only believed and worked hard enough, that the Prepaid Legal was going to come through.
Okay. As far as her spirituality, could you describe for us your understanding of her spirituality, say, for example, not maybe when you met her as an employer, but as you began dating, did you begin to learn about that?
Yes, I learned that Jodi was spiritual and that she had a belief in God, and that I would have to classify it as just non-denominational Christian from what I knew. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And moving back to that time period in 2006, in the fall of 2006, did that change?
That did change, actually. Jodi, we had discussed spirituality in the past. We were not actively religious. Jodi did become more actively religious in the fall of 2006.
Okay. And to your knowledge, what church or denomination did she become involved with?
The Church of Mormon.
Okay. And did you, how did you become aware of this? I mean, did she tell you this? Were there visitors to the home? How did that work?
She did mention it, and she mentioned that she was studying it. There were visitors to the home. There were prayer sessions in our home, and I knew that she was actively getting more involved and taking her spirituality more seriously.
Okay. Did that cause any more behavioral changes in Jodi that you saw?
It did indeed. At that time, we had stopped being intimate, and Jodi had told me that she was saving herself for a husband.
And so then the sleeping arrangements were the separate bedrooms, I would take it, at that point in time, right?
Indeed, they were.
Okay. And up to that point in time, you said you had an intimate relationship with Miss Arias. When did that intimate relationship begin?
That began sometime in 2002, late in 2002, after I had left my position at Ventana.
Okay. And it ended in fall of 2006 when she became involved in Prepaid Legal and the Mormon Church. Is that correct?
In the fall, she had been involved in Prepaid Legal months before, but that did become the case in the fall.
Okay.
Yes.
A moment, Your Honor. These visitors to the home that you mentioned, did they start showing up before or after this convention?
Before.
At that time in fall of 2006, were you aware of her becoming involved in a relationship with Travis Alexander?
No.
How did your relationship ultimately end? We were at a point where we were in separate bedrooms and she was saving herself for marriage and you were looking to move to Monterey. How did the relationship end?
At that point, I found employment in Monterey, and I moved late in December, and we parted at that point. And I didn't feel that the relationship had ended, but it definitely had changed.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, say parted. Does that mean you broke up, per se? Was there a breakup conversation?
There wasn't a formal breakup conversation as much as I think we both saw our paths going the other way. I was hoping that Jodi would be back with me after resolving the house issue, but it was an unsure time. It was left open.
Okay. Was she clinging on to you, trying to go to Monterey with you, anything of that nature?
At that time, no.
And so you eventually moved back to Monterey, and what became of the house?
The house eventually foreclosed in the following year. I was unable to support it past February of 2007.
Okay. After you moved to Monterey and the house went into foreclosure, what was your relationship with Jodi like during that time period, if there was any relationship?
I would have to say at that time the relationship was nothing but an occasional phone call. We were not romantically involved, obviously, and I had learned that she had left the house and moved to the Arizona area.
And so you remained friends on good terms?
We did.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Sir, you indicated that you moved from the Palm Desert home back to California in December of 2006, right?
Yes, sir.
And when you moved back, she didn't go with you, right?
Correct.
And even though time passed, you and she continue to be good friends, right?
We talked occasionally.
You were friends then, right?
Yes.
And she knew your phone number and you knew hers, right?
Yes.
And that continued on, for example, into 2007, right? You continued to have this relationship where you were sort of friends where you would call occasionally, right?
Correct.
And the same thing can be said for 2008, correct? You continued to be this sort of sporadic friend, right?
I had yes, sporadic contact, yes.
And in fact, back in 2008, she knew your number and you knew her number, right?
Correct.
And if she needed something, she would call you, right?
Objection, cause for speculation.
Sustained.
Well, sir, isn't it true that in May of 2008, you received a telephone call from the defendant, Jodi Arias?
I could have, yes.
Well, isn't it true that during that telephone call, she was asking you for a favor? Do you remember that?
No.
Do you remember that during that favor, she was asking you for gas cans in May of 2008 at the very end so that she could make a trip to Mesa, Arizona? You remember that?
Yes.
And she made more than one call asking you for these gas cans to make a trip to Arizona, didn't she?
Yes.
In fact, in the first part of June of 2008, she called you again asking about these gas cans to go to Mesa, right?
Yes.
And during the first time that she brought up this issue in the end of May of 2008, you asked her, why do you need these gas cans? Do you remember asking her that?
I do.
And she got really testy with you, didn't she?
Not necessarily testy. She said she needed them. She was taking a long trip.
Well, do you remember that you had a conversation with a representative from the defendant at some point? Do you remember that? They came out to visit you?
Yes.
And during that time, didn't you tell them that you asked her why she needed the gas cans, and she got testy?
Approach. You may continue.
She got testy, right?
I wouldn't say testy.
She wouldn't answer you, though, why she wanted those gas cans, right?
She did answer me.
She answered it during the second conversation that you had in the first part of June. She told you why she wanted those gas cans, right?
I don't recall if it was the first or the second conversation. She said she was taking a trip and wanted to borrow the gas cans.
Right, and she told you she was going to Mesa, right?
She said she was going on a long trip. Did not say particularly Mesa. No.
Well, sir, let's go ahead and mark this as an exhibit and see if this refreshes your recollection, okay? Sir, this is exhibit number 411. I first would like you to go to the page that at the lower right-hand corner says 357 and read the highlighted portion. And once you're done reading it, please let me know.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and turn. You can have that back. I'll turn the page for you and then read this portion here that's also highlighted. You do admit that you had a conversation with somebody representing the defendant, right?
I did have a conversation. Yes, sir.
And does this refresh your recollection as to the fact that she got testy with you or not?
No.
And with regard to going to Mesa, Arizona, does that refresh your recollection or not?
No.
But she said she was going to go on a trip, right?
She did.
And that's why she wanted the gas cans, right?
Yes.
And ostensibly, the reason that she wanted these gas cans is because she was going to get lost, right?
I don't know that she had any plans to get lost. No.
That's what she told you, that that was part of the reason why she needed the gas cans, right?
No.
Sir, she did come by your house on June 3rd of 2008, right before her trip, right?
Yes.
She came by and she had breakfast with you, right?
And we had some food, yes.
And your son was there, right?
Yes.
And that was around 7 o'clock in the morning, wasn't it?
Approximately, yes.
And while she was there, you allowed her to use your email or your computer, right?
Yes.
And she checked her email, right?
Yes.
And an individual by Matthew McCartney showed up also, right?
No.
You don't remember seeing him that morning?
No.
But at some point, she took off, right?
Yes.
When she came to see you, did you see any of her luggage or anything like that?
No.
And when she took off, she called you back again between 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning, didn't she?
I don't recall.
What was your telephone number back then, sir? With the area code, please.
What was my telephone number?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask this, we done off the record, so his phone number is not, at least he can write it down. Don't need to broadcast.
Council approach.
Let me show you another exhibit. that I have remarked. This is exhibit number 412, sir. Go ahead and write the cell number that you had back then on June 2nd and 3rd of 2008. And it's the same number you have now, correct?
Correct.
I move for the admission of exhibit 412.
No objection, just ask to be under seal.
All right, 412 will be sealed and admitted.
After she took off that morning, she returned, didn't she? To give you something?
I do not recall her returning, no.
Do you remember her giving you a remote control that she had taken off, that she had? Do you remember her returning and giving that back to you about 10 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, I do recall that.
And she also told you that she was going to head south, right?
Yes.
Do you remember the color of the car that she had?
No.
She was heading south, and one of the people that she wanted to visit was your sister, right? At least that's what she told
That's
you,
what
right?
I heard.
What's your sister's name, sir?
My sister's name is Laura Mahoney.
And where were you living back in June of 2008?
June of 2008, I was living in Pacific Grove.
Pacific Grove, is that near Monterey?
Yes.
How far is it, if you know in terms of miles, from Monterey to the Los Angeles area?
A little over 300.
And driving time, how much time would it be if you made the trip?
6 to 8 hours.
And she was telling you that that's where she was going to go, though, right?
Yes,
And before she left, though, you gave her 2 gas cans, didn't you?
I did.
Each were 5-gallon gas cans, right?
Correct.
For a total of 10 gallons that would be available to be put in these cans, right?
The cans would have held 10 gallons, yes.
And what color were the cans?
They were red.
And when you gave her these cans, did you ask her what she was going to use them for or not?
At the time, no.
Okay. Let me show you some exhibits. First of all, let's take a look at exhibit number 237.001. Can you see that, sir?
Yes.
We see that it says that there's an invoice, and it talks about June 3rd of 2008. That's the same day that she came to your house, right?
Correct.
And it shows us that the time on this one, it's 8:42 p.m. So if she had left your house at around 10, 11 o'clock, that would have given her ample time to get down to Pasadena, correct?
That would have given her ample time, yes.
And it says it's pump number 2, and it does give gallons, right?
It does.
It's 8.301 gallons, and then it gives the price, and then there's a payment there, right? Is that yes, sir? You can't
Yes,
take down the...
yes.
I apologize. And the time, I want you to note it specifically. It's 8:42 p.m., right?
Correct.
Are you familiar with military time, sir? Or is that something that you're not familiar with?
I'm familiar with it.
Okay, then let's take a look at exhibit 237.012. You see the time on that one there? It's 20:46:50, which is 8:46, right? You want me to bring it in a little bit
Yes.
more? And if you take a look at this other one, the previous exhibit, which is exhibit number 237.01, this is approximately 4 minutes later, right?
It appears to be, yes.
And this is also a sale for gas. And if you take a look at it, same gas station, right? Same, it appears to be the same, or it's same gas station in the same, that it's the Arco AM PM, right? Or Arco.
Yeah, one says AM, PM, the other doesn't.
Right. But one does say Arco, the other one also says Arco on it, right? And both of them are in Pasadena, California, right?
Correct.
However, the one that's a little bit later, about how much gas, can you see how much gas is purchased there?
It looks like 9.594 gallons.
That's approximately close to 10 gallons, right?
That's close to 10 gallons, yes.
And the address on that one is 3706 East Foothill Boulevard, right?
Yes.
Then if we look at this other one, 237.013, this other exhibit, we'll go with the time first. It's 8:53 p.m., right? See that upper left?
I see that, yes.
And that's approximately 7 minutes after the previous purchase, which is exhibit number 237.012, correct?
Correct.
And this one is for, can you see that it's for more gas? Can you see that?
Yes, it looks like 2.77 something.
Right. And if we add, let's just say 2.7 and round it off to 10, we're talking about 12.5 gallons, right?
Yes, without doing
Roughly,
that,
right?
yes.
Let's take a look at exhibit number 237.018. This one's from the Flying J Travel Plaza. You see that in a place called Winnemucca, Nevada, and that's June 6th of 2008. You see who the purchaser is there, right? Jodi Arias, correct?
Correct.
MasterCard. It talks about a pump, right? See that,
Yes.
number 11? Talks about the quantity, 12.175, one would assume gallons, right?
Yes.
Let's just do a little bit of basic math. Let's say the car she was driving had a capacity of 12 gallons.
Overruled.
And if you multiply that by 30 miles per gallon, let's just say that it's highway driving, that would be 360 miles, right?
I imagine if your math is correct,
If
yes.
the math is correct, that's what it would be. And we have roughly, on the other two exhibits that we talked about, we have roughly the same amount, 12 and a half gallons. Did you notice that? Do you remember that? That it
Yes.
was. And so if we're talking about that same 30 miles to the gallon, 12 and a half, we're talking about roughly another 360 miles, right?
Makes sense?
So if a person fills up, for example, in Pasadena, given the mathematics that we're doing, and puts 12 gallons in this car, and we're talking 30 miles, and I understand that these are just rough figures, you're talking 360 plus the other 12 and a half gallons, another 360, for a total of about 720 miles, right?
Correct.
So if a person, for example, have you ever been from the Los Angeles area to Mesa, Arizona, sir?
No, I never have.
You know where it is, though, right?
Somewhere in this area, from what I understand, it's my first visit to Arizona.
You know where Phoenix is, though, right?
It's where we are now, correct?
Right. And have you been here before or not?
No.
Later, the defendant came back to California and at some point called you, right?
Later as to when?
After, let's say, we were talking here about June 3rd, and that's when she came over to your house, right?
Correct.
And just for the sake of getting our dates right, the date on that gas receipt is June 3rd, right?
Yes.
The date on Exhibit 162 is what? And if you need to see it up there, I will bring it up to you, or I'll put this up on the Elmo so that we all can see it.
It looks to be June 4th.
Correct. One day after she was at your house in the morning about 7 o'clock, right?
Correct.
The gas cans, sir, did she ever return them to you?
No.
Did you ever ask her about returning those gas cans to you?
Don't recall if I ever had a chance to ask her, no.
Pardon?
No, I don't recall.
Sir, let's try to get a little bit of the chronology that involving your relationship with her. You did indicate that you met with her, or that you met her at the Ventana Inn and Spa, right?
Correct.
Did you meet her in the midsummer of 2002, or did you meet her in 2001 as you told us today? Which of the two is it?
I recall meeting her in the fall of 2001.
All right. You did start to date, though, in January of 2003, though, right?
Correct.
And you sort of made it official, started really seeing each other was at the San Francisco 49ers game, right?
Yes,
And that was, you spent the night together, right?
we did.
Was that the first time you and she had ever had sex?
No.
And you remember the first time you and she had sex, though, right?
I do remember, yes.
And she was very aggressive, wasn't she?
We were both aggressive.
Well, do you remember when the person came to talk to you, one of the things that you told them was that she was pretty aggressive on the first time that you had sex? Do you remember saying anything about that?
I do not recall saying that, no.
Well, let me show you that, okay? Go back to exhibit number 411. Take a look right here, top of page 7 right there. Take a look at this. Read that.
Okay.
Says that, right?
That's what that says, yes.
And you don't remember if you told that to anybody else?
No, I don't recall that.
Could it be that you did say that to somebody else or not?
I don't recall.
And not only was she aggressive, she was enthusiastic about it, wasn't she? The sex, I mean.
We were both enthusiastic, yes.
And she was comfortable with the intimacy, right?
Yes.
And at some point, you and she even enjoyed, I believe on 2 occasions, anal sex, right?
Possibly once.
Possibly once, couldn't have been 2?
I don't recall.
Then, you actually did move to Palm Desert in June of 2005 is what you told us though, right?
Correct.
That's when you bought the house after you moved there about a year later in May of 2006 when you bought the house, right? Is when you bought the house in Palm Desert.
We bought the house in Palm Desert in May, June of 2005.
So you didn't buy it in 2006?
No.
So if this indicates it was 2006, that would be an error then, correct?
That would be an error. Mhm.
So you do buy it in May of 2005. Actually, the price of the home was $360,000, wasn't it?
That sounds right.
And the monthly payment, I think you said before, was $1,700. It was actually $2,800 a month, wasn't it?
It could have been, yes.
And each of you were responsible for half of it, right?
Correct.
So that would mean that her share would have been $1,400, right?
Correct.
And in May of 2006, while you were at the house living there, that's when the defendant obtained the breast implants, correct?
Yes, she did have it, yes.
That was way before anything having to do with prepaid legal, right?
Not as I recall.
So that was at the time that it was in prepaid legal? She was in prepaid legal?
I believe she was already involved with prepaid legal before that, yes.
So in May of 2006, do you remember telling the investigator that the reason you believe that she got the breast implants is because she wanted to fit in the crowd that you were traveling in?
No, I don't recall that.
Because your wife had just recently obtained breast implants. Do you remember telling the investigator?
I do not recall my wife's breast implants, no.
Did your wife obtain or get breast implants?
I do not know.
And the implants were approximately $300 through a surgeon in La Jolla, California, correct?
I have no idea what the expense was.
Again, do you remember telling that to an investigator?
No.
So during May of 2006, is that when things started to be problematic between you and the defendant? Is that when things started to go south, as they say?
That would be the time that I noticed a dramatic change in Jodi's behavior, yes.
May of 2006, right?
April, May, yes, I can't be sure of an exact date.
And just so that we're clear, April or May of 2006, it may sound like not such a brilliant question, but that's before September of 2006, right?
Yes, May comes before September.
It does. And during that time is during the time when young men of the Mormon faith used to come over to your house, during that period starting around May, right?
I don't recall it being May, but yes, there were young men coming to the
And
house.
could it have been June of 2006 that they started to come over?
It could have been.
Right. And it was during that time, in May or June of 2006, that the defendant said to you, no more cursing, right?
I don't know your timeline. It may have been a little later.
It may have been a little later, June, July maybe of 2006?
Possibly.
But it was during the summer of 2006 anyway.
Yes.
And during that time, that's when she indicated to you that no more sex either, right?
I want to say the fall of 2006, yes.
And you were living in the same house, but no more sex because she was saving herself for marriage, right?
Correct.
And you were telling us that this is an individual that you knew really, really well, right?
Correct.
And that's what she was telling you, no more sex, right?
Yes, indeed.
And she was having these individuals of the Mormon faith come in and talk to her, right?
Yes.
And the reason that she was imposing this no sex thing was because she knew that that's what the Mormon faith sort of believed in, right? Overruled.
She was taking religion more seriously at that point, yes.
And that's why she was telling you that, right?
I believe that to be the case, yes.
And you had conversations with her about this, though, right? That's how come you know this, right?
Yes.
And during this particular time, there would be young men that would come over and they would sit down and they would read whatever it is that they were reading while you were there, correct?
Yes, I knew it to be a Bible study, yes.
Right, it was a Bible study. How often was this Bible study taking place in the summer of 2006?
I can't recall how many times I saw them.
And it was right on about that time, though, that the defendant stopped paying the bills, or her half of the bills, right?
Correct.
And it actually was in August of 2006 that she stopped paying the bills, right?
Sometime in the summer of 2006, she was having trouble with the bills, yes.
And so then you moved back in December of 2006 to California, right?
Correct.
And then it's up until February of 2007 that you are shouldering both your load as well as hers in terms of the payments, right?
Correct.
And the house ultimately goes into foreclosure and you lose it in January of 2008, right?
Correct.
When you were with her, she had an affinity or an interest in photography, right?
Yes.
She was always taking photographs of you, right?
She was always taking photographs, period.
Yeah, but some of it included you.
Some of it included me, sure.
In fact, she would take pictures of you sleeping at some point, right?
I believe there were a couple shots like that, yes.
She also took nudes of you at some point, right?
There was one incident in the shower where she took a picture, yes, one.
So she took a picture of you while you were in the shower, right?
Correct.
You didn't ask her to take that picture. She took that picture of you, right?
Yes.
And she, additionally, with regard to these photographs, she also took pictures of you shaving, right?
She may have had a shot of me shaving, yeah.
And with regard to the nude that she may have taken of you in the shower, you actually asked her to delete it, right?
No, I did not.
Did it stay in our camera, or was it deleted?
I have no idea.
Sir, after this date of June 4th of 2008, you had an occasion to receive a telephone call from Jodi Arias, right?
Yes.
She was very agitated, right?
Agitated, she was sad. She was upset.
Did you say that she was hysterically upset? Would you describe her as that?
I would say very upset. I could not see if she was hysterical.
She told you during that conversation, though, that her friend had been killed and she did not have an alibi. She told you that, right?
She did not say that, no.
She didn't tell you anything about her friend being killed?
She told me her friend had been killed, yes.
She didn't tell you anything about the alibi?
No.
Did she also tell you that she ran out of gas on her trip?
Yes, she did.
Did she tell you where she ran out of gas?
No.
Did you ask her where she ran out of gas?
Somewhere in the desert.
Did she also tell you that her friend had been stabbed and shot? Do you remember that part of the conversation?
I don't recall.
Sir, you also discussed with her, though, or you advised her, didn't you, about, at some point, about contact with the media, didn't you? After this conversation that we just talked about, sometime after the arrest, you had a conversation with her about giving interviews and contact with the media, didn't you?
I wouldn't classify the conversation as that, no.
Well, she talked to you about giving an interview to somebody from 48 Hours by the name of Jonathan Leach. Do you remember that?
No.
So, do you remember ever having dinner and meeting Jonathan Leach?
Oh, yes, I did.
And with regard to the defendant, isn't it true that you indicated that the defendant wanted all this publicity that was being generated by this case because she wanted to get money?
No.
I don't have anything else.
Redirect.
Mr. Brewer, did your sex life with Jodi Arias involve her wearing little boys' underwear?
No.
Did it involve putting her in schoolgirl outfits and pigtails?
No.
Did it involve bending her over desks?
No.
Did it involve ejaculating on her face?
No.
Did it involve calling her a whore,
No.
a slut,
No.
a three-hole wonder?
No.
Now, you were asked about, apart from your sex life with Miss Arias, you were asked about her coming to see you in June of 2008.
Yes.
June 3rd. She spent some time with you and your son, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And did everything seem fine?
Everything seemed fine and normal that I could see, yes.
Okay. And there was a couple things that were contradictory here regarding where she was going. I want to kind of back up. What was going on with your sister at that point in time in her life in the June of 2006?
My sister had a new baby.
Okay. And you were telling us that Jodi was going to come down to Pasadena to see her sister. Is that correct?
That was my understanding, yes.
Okay. Do you know if they ever met?
I understand that they did not.
Okay. Now, as it relates to the gas cans and where Jodi was going, on different occasions, one occasion you said Mesa, and one occasion you said a long trip. So I just wanted to clarify that with you.
I believe Jodi told me she was going on a long trip. She was going to see friends in Big Sur and Los Angeles and in Arizona and the Grand Canyon, I believe is what was said.
Okay. And so when you heard Mesa, or comments about Mesa, when you were asked about it, that wasn't accurate to your recollection of where she was going, right?
That's correct. She said Arizona. I didn't know of Mesa.
Okay. These notes that have been brought up to you, did you look at these before you testified today?
No, I don't know what those notes are.
Okay. You didn't approve of what was said or verify what was said as being accurate?
No.
You said in these notes that you recall the missionaries coming over in October of 2008, and when Mr. Martinez was asking you some questions, you said that it was in the summer of 2008. So I just wanted to clarify with you what your recollection is in terms of the relationship with Jodi, the celibacy, all those sort of things. Because when we spoke, it seemed like you were talking about it happening towards the latter part of 2008, or 2006, excuse me.
That's what I recall. If they had come over to the house in June, it could have been. I recall the late summer of 2008.
Okay. 2008 or?
I'm sorry, 2006, excuse me.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any questions from the jury for this witness? I see no hands. Thank you. You may step down. Counsel, please approach. And that's all we have for you today. We will see you back here tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Please remember the admonition. If you have not recently reviewed the admonition, please look at it. You will find a copy in your black notebook. Are there any questions? I know today you were given a key card to give you access to the back jury room. Please use it. Please exercise great caution to make sure you know where it is at all times. Are there any questions? Thank you. Have a nice evening. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. We're going to take a 10-minute recess. At that time, we will come back for cross-examination to complete the evidentiary hearing we began yesterday.